The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, recorded by Stage School Australia. Chapter 6, The Cowardly Lion. Dorothy and her companions continued walking through the thick woods. The road was still paved with yellow brick, but these were much covered by dried branches and dead leaves from the trees, and walking was not at all good. Now and then there came a deep growl from some wild animal hidden among the trees. These sounds made Dorothy's heart beat fast, for she did not know what made them. But Toto knew, and he walked close to her side and did not even bark in return.
How long will it be before we're out of the forest?
I cannot tell, for I have never been to the Emerald City. But my father went there once when I was a boy, and he said it was a long journey through a dangerous country. Although nearer to the city where Oz dwells, the country is beautiful. But I am not afraid so long as I have my oil can, nothing can hurt the Scarecrow, and you bear upon your forehead the mark of the Good Witch's kiss, and that will protect you from harm.
But Toto, what will protect him?
We must protect him ourselves if he is in danger.
Just as he spoke, there came from the forest a terrible roar. And the next moment, a great lion bounded into the road. With one blow of his paw, he sent the Scarecrow spinning over and over to the edge of the road, and then he struck at the Tin Woodman with his sharp claws. But, to the lion's surprise, he could make no impression on the tin, although the woodman fell over in the road. Little Toto, now that he had an enemy to face, ran barking toward the lion, and the great beast had opened his mouth to bite the dog when Dorothy, fearing Toto would be killed, rushed forward and slapped the lion upon his nose as hard as she could.
Don't you dare bite Toto! You ought to be ashamed of yourself, a big beast like you, to bite a poor little dog.
The lion withdrew and rubbed his nose with his paw.
I didn't bite him.
No, but you tried to. You are nothing but a big coward.
The lion hung his head in shame.
I know it. I've always known it. But how can I help it?
I don't know, I'm sure. To think of you striking a stuffed man like the poor Scarecrow.
Is he stuffed?
Of course he's stuffed.
That's why he went over so easily. It astonished me to see him whirl around so. Is the other one stuffed also?
No, he's made of tin.
And she helped the woodman up again.
Well, that's why he nearly blunted my claws. When they scratched against the tin, it made a cold shiver run down my back. What is that little animal you are so tender of?
He is my dog, Toto.
Is he made of tin or stuffed?
Neither. He's a meat dog.
Oh, he's a curious animal and seems remarkably small now that I look at him. No one would ever think of biting such a little thing, except a coward like me.
Dorothy looked at the great beast in wonder, for he was as big as a small horse.
What makes you a coward?
It's a mystery. I suppose I was born this way. All the other animals in the forest expect me to be brave, for the lion is thought to be the king of beasts. I learned that if I roared very loudly, every living thing was frightened and got out of my way. Whenever I've met a man, I've been awfully scared, but I just roared at him and he has always run away as fast as he could go. If the elephants and the tigers and the bears had ever tried to fight me, I should have run myself. I'm such a coward. But just as soon as they hear me roar, they all try to get away from me, and of course, I let them go.
But that isn't right. The king of beasts shouldn't be a coward.
The lion wiped away a tear with his tail.
I know it. It is my great sorrow, and it makes my life very unhappy. But whenever there is danger, my heart begins to beat fast.
Perhaps you have heart disease.
It may be.
If you have, you ought to be glad, for it proves you have a heart. For my part, I have no heart, so I cannot have heart disease.
Perhaps if I had no heart, I should not be a coward.
Have you brains?
I suppose so. I've never looked to see.
I am going to the Great Oz to ask him to give me some, for my head is stuffed with straw.
And I'm going to ask him to give me a heart.
And I am going to ask him to send Toto and me back to Kansas.
Do you think Oz could give me courage?
Just as easily as he could give me brains.
Then, if you don't mind, I'll go with you, for my life is simply unbearable without a bit of courage.
You will be very welcome, for you will help to keep away the other wild beasts. It seems to me they must be more cowardly than you are if they allow you to scare them so easily.
They really are, but that doesn't make me any braver. And as long as I know myself to be a coward, I shall be unhappy.
So once more the little company set off upon the journey, the lion walking with stately strides at Dorothy's side. Toto did not approve of this new comrade at first, for he could not forget how nearly he'd been crushed between the lion's great jaws. But after a time he became more at ease, and presently Toto and the cowardly lion had grown to be good friends. During the rest of that day, there was no other adventure to mar the peace of their journey. Once, indeed, the Tin Woodman stepped upon a beetle that was crawling along the road and killed the poor little thing. This made the Tin Woodman very unhappy, for he was always careful not to hurt any living creature. And as he walked along, he wept several tears of sorrow and regret. These tears ran slowly down his face and over the hinges of his jaw, and there they rusted tightly together. He became frightened at this and made many motions to Dorothy to relieve him, but she could not understand. But the Scarecrow seized the oil can from Dorothy's basket and oiled the Woodman's jaws so that after a few moments he could talk as well as before.
This will serve me a lesson to look where I step. For if I should kill another bug or beetle, I should surely cry again, and crying rusts my jaws so that I cannot speak.
Thereafter he walked very carefully, with his eyes on the road, and when he saw a tiny ant toiling by, he would step over it so as not to harm it. The Tin Woodman knew very well he had no heart, and therefore he took great care never to be cruel or unkind to anything. Chapter 7. The Journey to the Great Oz. They were obliged to camp out that night under a large tree in the forest, for there were no houses near. The Tin Woodman chopped a great pile of wood with his axe, and Dorothy built a splendid fire that warmed her and made her feel less lonely. She and Toto ate the last of their bread, and now she did not know what they would do for breakfast.
If you wish, I will go into the forest and kill a deer for you. You can roast it by the fire, since your tastes are so peculiar that you prefer cooked food. And then you will have a very good breakfast.
Don't. Please don't. I should certainly weep if you killed a poor deer, and then my jaws would rust again.
But the lion went away into the forest and found his own supper, and no one ever knew what it was, for he didn't mention it. And the Scarecrow found a tree full of nuts and filled Dorothy's basket with them, so that she would not be hungry for a long time. She thought this was very kind, but she laughed heartily at the awkward way in which the poor creature picked up the nuts. His padded hands were so clumsy, and the nuts were so small, that he dropped almost as many as he put in the basket. But the Scarecrow did not mind how long it took him to fill the basket, for it enabled him to keep away from the fire, as he feared a spark might get into his straw and burn him up. When it was daylight, Dorothy bathed her face in a little rippling brook, and soon after they all started toward the Emerald City. This was to be an eventful day for the travellers. They had hardly been walking an hour when they saw before them a great ditch that crossed the road and divided the forest as far as they could see on either side. It was a very wide ditch, and they could see it was also very deep, and there were many big jagged rocks at the bottom. The sides were so steep that none of them could climb down, and for a moment it seemed that their journey must end.
What shall we do?
I haven't the faintest idea.
We cannot fly, that is certain. Neither can we climb down into this great ditch. Therefore, if we cannot jump over it, We must stop where we are.
I think I could jump over it.
Then we are all right. For you can carry us all over on your back, one at a time.
Well, I'll try it. Who will go first?
I will. For if you found that you could not jump over the gulf, Dorothy would be killed, or the Tin Woodman badly dented on the rocks below. But if I am on your back, it will not matter so much, for the fall would not hurt me at all.
I am terribly afraid of falling myself, but I suppose there is nothing to do but try it. So get on my back and we will make the attempt.
The Scarecrow sat upon the lion's back, and the big beast walked to the edge of the gulf and crouched down.
Why don't you run and jump?
Because that isn't the way we lions do these things.
Then, giving a great spring, he shot through the air and landed safely on the other side. They were all greatly pleased to see how easily he did it, and after the Scarecrow had got down from his back, the lion sprang across the ditch again. Dorothy thought she would go next, so she took Toto in her arms and climbed on the lion's back, holding tightly to his mane with one hand. The next moment, it seemed as if she were flying through the air, and then, before she had time to think about it, she was safe on the other side. The lion went back a third time and got the Tin Woodman, and then they all sat down for a few moments to give the beast a chance to rest, for his great leaps had made his breath short, and he panted like a big dog that has been running too long. After the lion had rested, they started along the road of yellow brick, silently wondering, each in his own mind, if ever they would come to the end of the woods and reach the bright sunshine again. To add to their own discomfort, they soon heard strange noises in the depth of the forest.
This is the part of the country where the Kalidahs live.
What are the Kalidahs?
They are monstrous beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers and with claws so long and so sharp that they could tear me in two as easily as I could kill Toto. I'm terribly afraid of the Kalidahs.
Well, I'm not surprised that you are. They must be dreadful beasts.
The lion was about to reply when suddenly they came to another gulf across the road. But this one was so broad and deep that the lion knew at once he could not leap across it. So they sat down to consider what they should do. And after serious thought, the Scarecrow had an idea.
Here is a great tree, standing close to the ditch. If the Tin Woodman can chop it down so that it will fall to the other side, we can walk across it easily.
That is a first-rate idea. One would almost suspect you had brains in your head instead of straw.
The woodman set to work at once, and the tree was soon chopped nearly through. Then the lion put his strong front legs against the tree and pushed with all his might, and slowly the big tree tipped and fell with a crash across the ditch, with its top branches on the other side. They had just started to cross when a sharp growl made them all look up, and to their horror they saw running toward them two great beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers.
They are the Kalidahs!
Quick! Let us cross over!
So Dorothy went first, holding Toto in her arms. The Tin Woodman followed, and the Scarecrow came next. The lion, although he was certainly afraid, turned to face the Kalidahs, and then he gave so loud and terrible a roar that Dorothy screamed, and the Scarecrow fell over backward, while even the fierce beasts stopped short and looked at him in surprise. But, seeing they were bigger than the lion, and remembering that there were two of them and only one of him, the Kalidahs again rushed forward, and the lion crossed over the tree and turned to see what they would do next. Without stopping an instant, the fierce beasts also began to cross the tree.
We are lost, for they will surely tear us to pieces with their sharp claws. But stand close behind me, and I will fight them as long as I am alive.
Wait a minute! Tin Woodman, if you can chop through our end of the tree before they cross, we may be saved!
The Tin Woodman began to use his axe at once, and just as the two leaders were nearly across, the tree fell with a crash into the gulf, carrying the ugly, snarling brutes with it, and both were dashed to pieces on the sharp rocks at the bottom.
Well, I see we are going to live a little while longer, and I am glad of it, for it must be a very uncomfortable thing not to be alive. Those creatures frightened me so badly that my heart is beating yet.
I wish I had a heart to beat.
This adventure made the travellers more anxious than ever to get out of the forest, and they walked so fast that Dorothy became tired and had to ride on the lion's back. To their great joy, the trees became thinner the further they advanced, and in the afternoon they suddenly came upon a broad river flowing swiftly just before them. On the other side of the water, they could see the road of yellow brick running through a beautiful country, with green meadows dotted with bright flowers, and all the road bordered with trees hanging full of delicious fruits.
How shall we cross the river?
That is easily done. The Tin Woodman must build us a raft so we can float to the other side.
So the woodman took his axe and began to chop down small trees to make a raft, and while he was busy at this, the Scarecrow found on the riverbank a tree full of fine fruit. This pleased Dorothy, who had eaten nothing but nuts all day, and she made a hearty meal of the ripe fruit. But it takes time to make a raft, and when night came, the work was not done. So they found a cosy place under the trees where they slept well until the morning, and Dorothy dreamed of the Emerald City and of the good Wizard Oz, who would soon send her back to her own home again. Chapter 8. The Deadly Poppy Field. Our little party of travellers awakened the next morning refreshed and full of hope, and Dorothy breakfasted like a princess off peaches and plums from the trees beside the river. Behind them was the dark forest, but before them was a lovely sunny country that seemed to beckon them on to the Emerald City. To be sure, the broad river now cut them off from this beautiful land, but the raft was nearly done, and soon they were ready to start. Dorothy sat down in the middle of the raft and held Toto in her arms. When the Cowardly Lion stepped upon the raft, it tipped badly, for he was big and heavy. But the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman stood upon the other end to steady it, and they had long poles in their hands to push the raft through the water. They got along quite well at first, but when they reached the middle of the river, the swift current swept the raft downstream, further and further away from the road of yellow brick. And the water grew so deep that the long poles would not touch the bottom.
This is bad, for if we cannot get to the land, we shall be carried into the country of the Wicked Witch of the West, and she will enchant us and make us her slaves.
And then I should get no brains.
And I should get no courage.
And I should get no heart.
And I should never get back to Kansas.
We must certainly get to the Emerald City if we can.
The Scarecrow pushed so hard on his long pole that it stuck fast in the mud at the bottom of the river. Then, before he could pull it out again, or let go, the raft was swept away, and the poor Scarecrow was left clinging to the pole in the middle of the river.
Goodbye! I am now worse off than when I first met Dorothy. Then I was stuck on a pole in a cornfield where I could make believe scare the crows at any rate. But surely there is no use for a scarecrow stuck on a pole in the middle of a river. I am afraid I shall never have any brains after all.
Down the stream the raft floated, and the poor Scarecrow was left far behind. The Tin Woodman began to cry, but fortunately remembered that he might rust, and so dried his tears on Dorothy's apron.
Something must be done to save us. I think I can swim to the shore and pull the raft after me, if you will only hold fast to the tip of my tail.
The lion sprang into the water, and the Tin Woodman caught fast hold of his tail. Then the lion began to swim with all his might toward the shore. It was hard work, but by and by they were drawn out of the current, and then Dorothy took the Tin Woodman's long pole and helped push the raft to the land. They were all tired out when they reached the shore and stepped off upon the pretty green grass, and they also knew that the stream had carried them a long way past the road of yellow brick that led to the Emerald City.
Oh, what shall we do now?
We must get back to the road in some way.
The lion lay down on the grass to let the sun dry him.
The best plan will be to walk along the riverbank until we come to the road again.
So, when they were rested, Dorothy picked up her basket and they started along the grassy bank to the road from which the river had carried them. It was a lovely country, and had they not felt so sorry for the poor Scarecrow, they could have been very happy. They walked along as fast as they could, and after a time the Tin Woodman stopped suddenly.
Look!
Then they all looked at the river and saw the Scarecrow perched upon his pole in the middle of the water, looking very lonely and sad.
What can we do to save him?
The lion and the woodman both shook their heads, for they did not know. So they sat down upon the bank and gazed wistfully at the Scarecrow, until a stork flew by, who, upon seeing them, stopped to rest at the water's edge.
Who are you, and where are you going?
I am Dorothy, and these are my friends, the Tin Woodman and the Cowardly Lion, and we are going to the Emerald City.
This isn't the road.
I know that, but we have lost the Scarecrow and are wondering how we shall get him again.
Where is he?
Over there in the river.
If he wasn't so big and heavy, I would get him for you.
He isn't heavy a bit, for he is stuffed with straw. And if you bring him back to us, we shall thank you ever and ever so much.
Well, I'll try. But if I find he is too heavy to carry, I shall have to drop him in the river again.
So the big bird flew into the air and over the water till she came to where the Scarecrow was perched upon his pole. Then the stork, with her great claws, grabbed the Scarecrow by the arm and carried him up into the air and back to the bank, where the rest of the party were sitting. When the Scarecrow found himself among his friends again, he was so happy that he hugged them all, even the lion and Toto, and as they walked along, he sang at every step.
I was afraid I should have to stay in the river forever, but the kind stork saved me, and if I ever get any brains, I shall find the stork again and do her some kindness in return.
The stork was flying along beside them.
That's all right. I always like to help anyone in trouble, but I must go now, for my babies are waiting in the nest for me. I hope you will find the Emerald City and that Oz will help you.
Thank you!
Then the kind stork flew into the air and was soon out of sight. They walked along listening to the singing of the brightly coloured birds and looking at the lovely flowers which now became so thick that the ground was carpeted with them. There were big yellow and white and blue and purple blossoms, besides great clusters of scarlet poppies, which were so brilliant in colour they almost dazzled Dorothy's eyes. She breathed in their spicy scent.
Aren't they beautiful?
I suppose so. When I have brains, I shall probably like them better.
If I only had a heart, I should love them.
I always did like flowers. They seem so helpless and frail, but there are none in the forest so bright as these.
They now came upon more of the big scarlet poppies and fewer of the other flowers, and soon they found themselves in the midst of a great meadow of poppies. Now, it is well known that when there are many of these flowers together, their odour is so powerful that anyone who breathes it falls asleep. And if the sleeper is not carried away from the scent of the flowers, he sleeps on and on forever. But Dorothy did not know this, nor could she get away from the bright red flowers, so presently her eyes grew heavy, and she felt she must sit down to rest and to sleep. But the Tin Woodman would not let her do this.
We must hurry and get back to the road of yellow brick before dark.
Agreed!
So they kept walking until Dorothy could stand no longer. Her eyes closed in spite of herself, and she forgot where she was and fell among the poppies, fast asleep.
Oh, what shall we do?
Oh, if we leave her here, she will die. The smell of the flowers is killing us all. I myself can scarcely keep my eyes open, and the dog is asleep already.
Run fast and get out of this deadly flower bed as soon as you can. We will bring the little girl with us, but if you should fall asleep, you are too big to be carried.
So the lion roused himself and bounded forward as fast as he could go. In a moment, he was out of sight.
Let us make a chair with our hands and carry her.
So they picked up Toto and put the dog in Dorothy's lap, and then they made a chair with their hands and carried the sleeping girl between them through the flowers. On and on they walked, and it seemed that the great carpet of deadly flowers that surrounded them would never end. They followed the bend of the river, and at last came upon their friend the lion, lying fast asleep among the poppies. The flowers had been too strong for the huge beast, and he had given up at last.
We can do nothing for him, for he is much too heavy to lift. We must leave him here to sleep on forever, and perhaps he will dream that he has found courage at last.
I'm sorry. The lion was a very good comrade for one so cowardly. But let us go on.
They carried the sleeping girl to a pretty spot beside the river, far enough from the poppy field to prevent her breathing any more of the poison of the flowers, and here they laid her gently on the soft grass and waited for the fresh breeze to waken her. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. To be continued.